Nearly half a century ago, the term near-death experience entered the cultural lexicon with the publication of Dr. Raymond Moody's iconic book, Life After Life. However, as noted by some near-death researchers, the earliest examples of published near-death or near-death-like experiences trace much earlier than the late 20th century, including a possible NDE described in Plato's Republic, as well as the quote, apocryphal early 3rd century text, the Acts of Thomas. Recently, I was researching a forthcoming video presentation on historical accounts of human beings who accurately prophesied the timing and manner of their own deaths. I became fascinated with the topic a number of years ago when I read about the passing of NBA legend Pete Maravich. In 1974, the basketball star was quoted as saying in an interview with the Beaver County Times, "I don't want to play 10 years in the NBA and die of a heart attack at age 40. Maravich played in the NBA for exactly 10 years. When he died of a heart attack in 1988, he was exactly 40 years old. I became curious how common such anecdotal evidence might be of humans apparently predicting the manner and/or dates of their own deaths, even years in advance. So I began exploring online databases of newspaper archives, dating back up to centuries. As I'll explain in a forthcoming full-length presentation, I was surprised to discover at least dozens of examples, which arguably are even more compelling than the Maravich case. However, in the earliest newspaper account I could find of an apparent death prophecy, which came from the late 19th century, I was startled to also find a casual reference to what could only be called a near-death experience, which the newspaper headline characterized as a, quote, trial trip to heaven. I will now read the account to you verbatim, as it was published in the semi-weekly Democrat, Olean, New York, June 1895. A young girl predicted her own death 3 years ahead. On Thursday, Miss Annie E. Bennett, daughter of Reverend A.J. Bennett of Hinton, West Virginia, died of consumption, aged 24 years. She was a member of the Primitive Baptist Church, of which her father is pastor, and was a most devout young lady. 3 years ago, just as it was becoming apparent that the dread disease had fastened itself upon her, she made a statement to several of her fellow students at the Baptist Academy that she would die on May 23, 1895. This statement was recorded by several of the girls as a joke, and that it might not be effaced, one of them scratched it on the woodwork of the room in which it was made at the school. An examination shows the date to be still quite plain and distinct. Miss Bennett had stated to her friends that she had been warned and given to know the date of her death by a vision when she was walking alone in the wood near the school in broad daylight. A few hours before death, Miss Bennett became apparently lifeless, the breath leaving her body. After a short time, she regained consciousness and stated that she had been to heaven and had conversed with her brother, Arthur Bennett, and her sister, Mrs. Lyd Lamb, both of whom had been dead for several years. This conversation was detailed, and a description of heaven was given those about the bedside. She died smiling, and the last words were that she hoped those about her might be allowed to join her soon. In my next presentation, I will outline more than 12 such historical cases when human beings have seemingly demonstrated the uncanny and perhaps frightening ability to foresee their own physical deaths.